Shevet Ruvain, who will bring back the children to their fathers. Okay, so we have a first thing that Hosea, it's in his blood. To tshuva is in his blood. To bring Am Yisrael closer to Hashem, it's in his blood. It's who he is. It's his forefathers. It's been prophesied, and according to the Midrash, to Ruvain, that in thousands of years hence, maybe 1,000 years hence, your son, a son of yours, will bring Am Yisrael back b'tshuva, and that is Hosea, maybe his father. And the other seer we said Hosea has a father and Hosea has a teacher, and his teacher, according to the Rambam, was Zechariah, who we met in this. I don't know how to call this midrash that we saw about Zechariah, the prophet who was killed in Beit HaMikdash, and whose blood boiled until Nebuzaradan, the general of Nebuchadnezzar, almost kills all of Am Yisrael and says, "Is this too much?" And then Hashem tells the blood to cool down. So Hosea, that's his teacher. That's Hosea's teacher. In other words, Hosea is the beginning of what leads in the end of the day to Churban HaBayit. We also talked about a big chidush, in my mind, of prophecy leaving the realm of practical life and going off into a commentary on as opposed to living in. Hosea being the first of the prophets who isn't involved in the storyline that we're learning, but he is like a prophet who comments on reality as opposed to lives reality within. Up to Eliyahu Navi, Elisha, the prophet living the reality of the story, or let's say our major players in the story. Hosea is the first who steps back. Yeah.
Was it something along the lines of they saw that society was just getting out of control, so they couldn't be a part of it anymore and do their jobs as Navi, and they had to step back?
Oh, that would be one level of understanding. After Zechariah gets murdered in Beit HaMikdash for doing exactly what all the prophets are going to do, possibly they realize they can't be so involved. They have to somehow be not involved because they're in danger. Their life is in danger, as we'll see in Yirmiyahu and Yeshayahu. Yeshayahu was murdered according to the Midrash, and Yirmiyahu was attempted to be murdered time and time again. We know it's a dangerous thing. They Yirmiyahu references another prophet who was killed by the king. It was definitely not if you wanted to live, being a prophet in the days of the kings was not the best line of work. Right. So it could be, but I think it's on a deeper level. Hashem takes a step back. I think it's on a deeper level. That's what happens. The prophets may have seen, okay, we're taking a step back, but I think on the deeper level, Hashem is saying, no, you guys can't handle this anymore. You can't handle this anymore. I'm taking a step back, and that's why this is the beginning of the Churban. This is the beginning of the Churban, Hosea's time, which is way before the Churban, both before the time of Galut Yisrael, a little bit before the exile of Israel, and the exile of and hundreds of years before, 150 years before the exile of Yehuda. Tov. We also said, and this is where we ended up. This is right before we got to this is where we got to the last lesson, was that the story of Hosea, according to Chazal, has a backstory to it, and that backstory is the one we have to see. In other words, when it says Tchilat diber Hashem beHosea, and then he tells him something, we're going to see what he tells him. There is a previous storyline to that, and this is a Gemara in Pesachim, very important for understanding Hosea, and Bichlal maybe understanding Tshuva. He has there's a whole discussion going on before the story happens. Okay, so if you guys have the papers from last week, of course everyone kept their paper from last week and can just pull it right out, right? But not this week. This week's is here. Last week's. And if you don't, you're going to have to believe what I read to you. That's your problem. You have to trust me. Okay? So if you guys, those who have it, it's on the third line, the very last source on the page. Talmud Bavli, Masechet Pesachim, Daf Pei Zayin Amud Aleph. The third line, right in the middle of the line. Or not in the middle, towards the beginning of the line. After it says that there were 4 prophets who prophesied at the same time, we saw that in the intro. Amar lo HaKadosh Baruch Hu Hosea. Hashem appears to Hosea and he says to him, Banecha chatu.
Did you already
This is last week's page.
Oh, okay.
I only people who have last week's page gets this week's page. Okay. Banecha chatu says your children have sinned. Hashem says to Hosea, Banecha chatu. Okay? What's the right remark to that? Banecha chatu? The Gemara says, you don't have to worry. The Gemara says what he's supposed to say. Hayalo lomar. Hosea should have said, okay? Banechahem. Right? It's like, Banai, they're my children, Hosea should have said. Banechahem, they're your children. Bnei Chanunechahem, the children of your mercy they are. Bnei Avraham, Yitzchak v'Yaakov, Galgel Rachamecha alehem. Have mercy on them. Roll your mercy on them. Bring back your mercy on them. That's the right answer, right? It's like, what's the right answer and the wrong answer? That was the right answer. Unfortunately, according to Chazal, that was not the answer Hosea gave. What is the answer? Hosea gives a great answer. Hosea says like this. Lo dayo shelo amar kach. Not only did he not answer this, he answered worse. Ela amar lefanav ribono shel olam. Kol haolam shelcha hu. Ha'avirem be'uma acheret. The whole world is yours. Hosea says to Hashem, the whole world is yours. Take another nation. Ouch. Ouch. A prophet in Israel. That's his answer.
Contrast to Yonah, we just learned.
To Yonah, contrast to Moshe, contrast to every prophet almost. Maybe a little Eliyahu you could hear in the background here. But Hosea says, you have the whole world. What are you stuck with them? You're right. They have crossed the line. Give them someone else. That's a fascinating. It's just first of all, the midrash is fascinating. That beginning, that this all happens before the book of Hosea. Does this happen right before Hashem is about to tell him what He's about to tell him? And Chazal put this discussion. First of all, you see it's important. It's prominent. This discussion. It's important. Hashem says to the prophet something, and He expects the prophet to answer in a certain way. There is a prophetic job. The job of the prophet is defending the nation. Even though when you look at what the prophet says to the people, most of the prophets, what they're going to say to Am Yisrael is the most horrible criticism anyone ever gets, right? They call them adulterers and murderers and thieves and robbers. Yirmiyahu, Yeshayahu. They call them, you're like Sdom, you're like Amorah, you're like the worst of the Goyim. They really get into they bash them. But what's the inner place of the prophet? What is the soul of the prophet? The soul of the prophet was supposed to be that answer. Banayhem, banechahem, bnei chanunecha, bnei Avraham, Yitzchak v'Yaakov, galgel rachamecha alehem. That is the correct answer to all the questions. All questions, that's the answer. Everything Hashem says to the prophet, that's the answer. When Hashem gets mad, the prophet's supposed to be the one who says, Hashem, Hashem, Hashem. They're your people.
Like Moshe.
Like Moshe Rabbeinu. They're your people. Now Moshe gets mad at the people too. It's a fascinating midrash that the rabbi in our shul brought, where Hashem says to Moshe, Hashem gets mad at the people, and Moshe gets mad at the people, and Hashem says, hey, hold up. One of us has to be okay. If I'm mad, you better cool down. If you're mad, I'll cool down, but we can't do this together. It's a fascinating thing. And the prophet is an important part of the relationship of Hashem to Am Yisrael. He is in a sense, the Shechina possibly, the Rach, the motherly part of Hashem's appearance in the world. He has a job. His job towards Hashem is always to be the defendant of Am Yisrael. That's a prophet's job. His job to Am Yisrael, on the other hand, is to rip into them and try to bring them back to tshuva in any way he can, usually very harshly. In other words, a prophet is a really, really difficult position. On the one hand, he's bringing the word of Hashem to the people with all its harshness. On the other hand, he's supposed to be someone who loves Am Yisrael so deeply that, as Moshe Rabbeinu says, kill me. I can't. If this is what you're gonna do to the people, take me out of here. I'm gone. Put his life on the line for Am Yisrael.
Like a mother who's disciplining their child. It's going off, veering off the.
Machon Meir. She could yell at her child,
berating him, but she still needs to.
But if she needs to, she'll put her life down on the line. So this is what a prophet's supposed to be. Hosea didn't get it. Hosea probably, and here I'm doing some rabbinic psychology, after Zechariah, after the death of his teacher, who was murdered by the king, he's like, that's it, I'm done. And Hosea is going to have to learn a lesson. And this is amazing. Hosea being the first of all the prophets that we're going to see in the whole list of, a long list of all Treasar, including Yirmiyahu, Yeshayahu, and Yechezkel, they're all going to come after him. Hosea is the very first. He has to learn a lesson that everyone's going to have to learn. And so Hashem's about to put him through a Sidrat Chinuch. Sidrat Chinuch means he's about to teach him a lesson, as we say. Not just teach him a lesson, teach him a lesson. So before we go on in the Midrash, what Hashem's about to say to him, let's take a look at Hosea, okay? Everyone, please open up your Tanachim, your Hoseas.
When Hashem says to Moshe, your people have sinned. Obviously, Moshe didn't read that. He didn't see that Moshe's answer was to go immediately defend them. It's almost the same thing.
I'm sure, but Hosea understands. He could have learned from Moshe, but he doesn't. He is not in that position. He's going to have to learn. He thinks that it could end, that this brit can end. That's what he thinks.
So bad
they're so bad that they're many times it's been on the gvul.
But contrasting it to what happened with Moshe, he says, really Hashem says to Moshe that he can build Am Yisrael through you, because he understood it. Like it has to be through this Chut Avot. There still has to be something
from Am Yisrael. It's two, but Hosea is done. Hosea is even worse than that. You're right. Moshe understands that it's coming through him, but Hosea says, you know what? Just mop it up and start again. No one says something like that. You're right. It's a very powerful statement. Mop it up and start again. It's not working. Am Yisrael, for many years, they tried. It's not working. Hashem, just start again. So let's read Hosea, please. Everyone look inside. We're going to see the first chapter. The first chapter is short and pretty much story-lined and very strange. So let's start from Pasuk Aleph. If David, can you hit the mazgan? I'm hot. I don't know about you guys. Good. That's a good nonchalant over-the-shoulder attack. I like that. Good. Dvar Adonai, אשר היה אל הושע בן בארי בימי עוזיה יותם אחז יחזקיהו מלכי יהודה ובימי ירבעם בן יואש מלך ישראל. תחילת דיבר אדוני בהושע. We're going to say that תחילת דיבר אדוני בהושע has two general lines. One is the line that we talked about of this is the beginning of all this kind of prophecy. The beginning, it's like sort of like Bereshit. Techilat diber Hashem b'Hosea. In the beginning, Hashem spoke to Hosea. Another line that we're going to say is Techilat diber Adonai b'Hosea is within Hosea. B'Hosea. Within Hosea himself. That, I think, is what Chazal are coming from when they have this whole thing that they're talking. This is between Hashem and Hosea. Am Yisrael aren't even part of this. Only in Perek Daled is Hosea going to start talking to Am Yisrael. Right at first, Hosea himself has to get himself straight. So Hashem's talking b'Hosea. But let's see. ויאמר אדוני אל הושע, לך קח לך אשת זנונים וילדי זנונים, כי זנו תזנה הארץ מאחרי אדוני. Hashem says to Hosea, go take a adulterous wife, a prostitute. Have children who are from a prostitute, which means you may not be sure if they're your children. Because the land is prostituting away from Hashem. Okay? Whoa.
Why did Hashem ever tell him that?
Whoa, hold on. Right, okay, let's go on. וילך, ויקח את גומר בת דבליים.
Even the name is...
We don't know what the story is. Gomer bat Divai, but it's a name. Vatar v'teled lo ben. And achen, she has a child. ויאמר אדוני אליו, קרא שמו יזרעאל. כי עוד מעט ופקדתי את דמי ישראל על בית יהוא, והשבעתי ממלכות בית ישראל. So Hashem says to him, okay, call this kid, the first child, his name, the first son is born Israel. That's his name, Yisrael.
What's Israel, like the valley?
I'll tell you in a second. You're right, like Emek Israel. That's it. Israel, right? Emek Israel, which is from the Gilboa, from the western side of the Gilboa, sort of flows down towards the Afula area, okay, in the north of Israel. But his name is Yisrael. We're going to have to see, obviously, there's great meaning to this name, right? Yisrael. Ki od me'at, says Hashem, who explains the name, because soon, ufakadeti et dmei Yisrael al beit Yehu. I will call to account the blood of Israel on the house of Yehu. This means we have to know. We have to know who Yehu is. We have to know what's going on, where we are in history, right? We're going to have to see what's going on here. Okay, we're going to have to learn some Sefer Melachim. Upakati et dmei Yisrael al beit Yehu. I will bring account the blood of Israel on Beit Yehu, which is not a good thing for Beit Yehu. Vishbati mamlechut Beit Israel. And I will nullify, stop the kingdom of Israel. Not a good prophecy. Okay? And somehow this has to do with the son who's being born. But we're not done yet. I will, Hashem says, I will break the bow and arrow. I will break the keshet of Israel in Emek Israel, in the valley of Israel. So here's the valley, you guys said, this Emek Israel, we have Israel has to do with you. We're going to have to take a look what this is. But the first child, his name is Israel, and it's a sort of a negative prophecy. Hashem's going to remember the blood in Israel, and he's going to break the bow of Israel in Emek Israel. The word Yisrael, positive, negative, the word?
It's negative.
What does it sound like? Just the word. Like Emek Yisrael.
It sounds like Zera.
Okay, like Zera. And who's going to bring the Zera?
Oh, okay. Well, it's not Zera in like an Ayin, it's like Yezer, like foreign.
Like Zar?
No.
Yeah, like Zar.
Zra with it has an ayin.
Oh, yeah, you're right. Yeah.
Yisrael. It's there. Yisrael. The Zera is there. It sounds like Hashem will plant a seed. Yisrael, right? He will plant a seed. Emek Yisrael at first, I mean, you wouldn't call it a negative name, right? Yisrael. The word Yisrael offhand sounds pretty positive. But here the son is called Yisrael, which isn't bad itself, but apparently bad things happened in Yisrael. Okay, and that's what Hashem's going to take revenge on. Okay, that's only the first child. Let's go on. Vatar od vateled bat. Vayomer lo, kra shma lo ruchama. Great name, right? Anyone know anyone named Ruchama?
I actually do.
Yeah, you do. Well, this is Lo Ruchama. It's her alter ego. It's her evil twin. Lo Ruchama. Ki lo osif od arachem et Beit Yisrael. Ki naso esa lahem. We have to see what those words naso esa lahem.
Say Lo Ruchama. They're not named Ruchama, is what he's saying?
Her name is Lo Ruchama.
Oh.
The whole thing is her name.
Yeah. Don't call her. You could call her anything besides Ruchama. That's not what it says here. Okay? Don't say Krashma. Anything you want, just Lo Ruchama. That's not what it says. It says call her name Lo Ruchama. That's her name, which means Ki lo osif od arachem et Beit Yisrael. I will not continue to have mercy on Am Yisrael. Ki naso esa lahem. We're gonna have to see how that works. What does that mean? Ki naso esa lahem. Okay, but it seems again this one's already negative, straight out bad. The name itself, Lo Ruchama. Also, just an interesting point. If you guys see in Pasuk Dal, it says, Vayomer Adonai elav kra. Sorry, in Pasuk Gimel. Vayelech v'yikach et gomer bat divlaim, v'tayr v'teled lo ben. And Pasuk Vav, v'tayr od v'teled bat.
Oh.
What's missing?
Lo.
Lo. Well, why do we not know who he's from?
She still does her date or night job?
Nachon. That's what it seems like. We don't know whose child this one is. Lo Ruchama. Okay? Vet bet, now, Pasuk Zayin is in parentheses. Vet bet Yehuda arachem. V'oshatim b'Adonai Elohehem. V'lo shiem bekeshet u'becher u'milchama u'besusim u'parashim. Sograim, Yisrael are in big trouble, but Yehuda I will still have mercy on. Right? As opposed to Lo Ruchama, because Lo Orachem al Beit Yisrael, al Beit Yehuda ken arachem.
Okay, so
I will.
this isn't a real story?
What do you mean it's not a real story?
Doesn't Israel and Lower Chama aren't Israel kids?
I don't know.
He didn't actually take a
Up
prostitute wife.
up until now, what do you think?
Well, now it seems to be a mashal for...
It's definitely a mashal, but did it happen or not? Good. Hold that. So one of the first things we're going to see. Okay?
Guys, why the heck did Hashem have to ask Hosea to do this? Not to ask Hosea to have someone else do this.
Well, hold on. Let's see what's going on. Okay? But that's a parenthesis. Beit Yehuda seems to get out of this horrible decree. And just remind, we have to keep in our mind, we have Yisrael and Yehuda. So there are two different kingdoms. Tov. Vatigmol et lo ruchama. Okay, that means time passes. Vatigmol et lo ruchama. What does that mean, vatigmol?
To give or to wean.
To wean. She weans him off, right? That means she's finished nursing lo ruchama. Gomer batiflaim. Vatayr vetelet ben. Also not lo. But vatayr vetelet ben. Here's the third child. And this guy gets a great name. Vayomer kra shmo lo ami. Lo ami. Not Amiel. Lo ami. He is not my nation. And he says, Ki atem lo ami. Vanochi lo eye lachem. And obviously what are we supposed to say? Lo lachem. Le'elokim. Right? That's what everyone obviously says, but it's interesting that it stops there. Vanochi lo eye lachem. That's the end of the parak. Okay? So we have three children. We have Yisrael. We have Lo Ruchama. And we have Lo Ami. And whose name is explained as you are not my nation, and I won't be your God, kanire, which is pretty strong stuff. Yeah.
Could this last few words, could it be interpreted as like a callback to by the snad, the name Eya, that he says Lo Eya Lachem?
זה יופי. Says the Dat Mikra, כדי לרמוז גם לשם אהיה, שנתגלה למשה במעמד הסנה. Hashem zer nitkana Yisrael l'rishona. The Dat Mikra agrees with you straight out that the Ehyeh here is reconnecting to there, and it's coming out of there. There he said, I will always be with you. Here he says, I'm not going to be with you anymore. Retracting what he said. Okay, people, that's our chapter. Wow. As the first question comes up immediately, did this happen or did this not happen? What is going on here? Before we jump into the continuation of the discussion that we began before, where Hashem talking to them, we have as basic curious readers, when you read this parak, is this a story or is this a prophecy? What exactly is going on? Is this happened? Did this happen? Can it be both? Is it a story, a prophetic story, a story that's a prophecy? What in the world is going on? Did Behemeti tell him to go marry a prostitute and have 3 children from them?
Seems pretty straightforward.
Yafe. So now I want to introduce you guys to the wonders of our commentaries, okay? That I like to bring to you guys, okay? Oh, yeah, take the page. I'm going to let everyone get a page, even so, just today. Please bring your page next time, too. Keep it. Put it in a frame or something so you guys have it for next week. So we have Rashi. Okay, Rashi says here, Kach lecha eshet znunim. And very shortly, he says, Rabotenu amru kemashma'o. Chazal said, as it's written, so it is. It's kacha. Correct. This is what happened. לפי שאמר ישראל החליפים באומה אחרת, כמו מפרש בפסחים ריש פרק האישה. Just as it's a answer to Hosea, who said, החליפים באומה אחרת, change them with another nation, that we saw in Psachim. Hashem says, oh, you want me to change them for another nation? I'm going to teach you a lesson here. And then he goes on to this thing. What exactly is the lesson? We'll see as it goes on. But he says, yes, you, Hosea, have a problem. You don't understand the right relationship between Am Yisrael and Hashem. Therefore, you, Hosea, go marry someone, because I'm going to show you through your own life how much I have mercy on Am Yisrael, how much I really love Am Yisrael. I'm going to show you from inside yourself. Experiential learning. Okay, that's what he's going to do to him. Experiential learning. We could talk about something, or you could go do it. He says, Hosea, I could talk to you all day, but I'm going to make you go do something, and you're going to understand yourself. Yeah.
When we say Bnei Zinunim, we mean, first of all, is his wife adulterous while he's with her?
That's what it seems like.
That's the story.
Oh, yes, it is.
Okay.
Okay, let's go on. Yeah, you're right. It's a horrible situation. Yeah, it's very strange.
But that doesn't make much sense to me.
He's like, I have to not do that, though.
Even in the worst situations, Hashem never told a prophet at the lowest of lows of all lows to go do an Avera, and I'm going to show you through that.
You never learned Hosea.
That doesn't make sense.
Well, I want to say, you haven't learned Hosea yet. Yeah, up until now, you'd probably be right in everything you've learned until now, but suddenly we're learning Hosea, malasot. But it's okay, Ezra. The Ibn Ezra agrees with you 100%. Let's take a look at the Ibn Ezra. Right after Ra'abah. Okay, I'm jumping over the next Rashi. Okay, let's read. V'yaldei znunim, as you just asked. Seder, sheteled decha yeladim shiyu sfekei mamzerut. You can have children who are safek mamzerim. What a mamzer is, someone who's born through adultery or from Yisurei Karet. Rashi says, this is what's going to happen. You're going to have children from this lady and you won't know. You will not know if they are mamzerim or not. They're sfekei mamzerim.
What do you do with sfekei?
Big trouble. They're going to have a very hard time getting married. These sfekei mamzerim. So you go into the halacha, how you get to safek mamzer. What do you do? That's already a whole new practice. But practically, they're asurim for Yisrael. Betach safek mamzerut is isur doraita. You to safek doraita lechuma. You wouldn't.
Asur for Yisrael and asur. That's the question.
Well, no, they're Jews. She's Jews.
So who do they marry?
No, maybe not.
Non-Jews.
Because if they're not a mamzer, they can't marry a mamzer. Another safek mamzer. They would be the only people that have to be.
Even then,
they're in big trouble. It's a horrible situation. No, we're not like us. It's horrible. What's going on here? Yes. What? You can't marry a non-Jew.
They're still Jews.
You can't marry a non-Jew. You marry a non-Jew? Yeah. No, I mean maybe a shivcha Knaanit. One possibility, but let's not go there. This isn't a halachic discussion right now. It's just you should be properly indignant. Right? Is that the right word?
Offended.
Could be offended. It's weird. It's very wacky what's going on here. Okay, very strange. Now, before we go to Yonatan to your game, who gives a whole new aspect of what's going on, let's look at the Ibn Ezra. Ready? Ibn Ezra read it just like Ezra read it, and he's like, no way. Let's see. Neum Avraham HaMechaber. Avraham HaMechaber's speech. The Ibn Ezra. Chalila, Chalila. שיצווה השם לקחת אשת זנונים ולהוליד ילדי זנונים. ואומר דיו לעבד להיות כרבו, לא נאמר על זה. מה פתאום that's saying like the Eved should be like Rabbo, that he's teaching him a lesson. And no, what are you talking about? כי זנות מאחרי השם דרך משל. רק באדם ובמעשה. Against, when we talk about znut for Hashem, it's a mashal znut. But if a man really does znut, that's real znut. Ma pitom. V'anachon be'enai, and what's right in my eyes. Ki ze hanavi haya ro'eh b'mar'ot nevuah b'chalom halayla. She'Hashem amar lo, lech kach lecha eshet znunim. V'alach v'lakach isha yedua, v'harta v'yalda kol ze b'mar'ot nevuah. This whole thing is a prophetic vision. In his prophetic vision, Hashem says to him, go take a prostitute and marry her and have children. And he does that in his prophetic vision. Bechalomot halayla. In a dream. Kasher piresh im yaniviachem levad mimoshe levado. Hashem b'mareh elav etvada b'chalom adaber. Besides Moshe, who gets direct speech, everyone else, it's through visions and dreams. Ve'al titma. How can don't be surprised how in a dream it really talks like real. Vayelech vayikach. says no. והנה בחלום אדם בלא נבואה, ותאכלנה הפרות, וכך על ישעיהו הנביא, כאשר הלך עבדי ישעיהו, ערום ויחף, זה היה במראה הנבואה. כי למה ילך הנביא ערום בעבור כוש ומצרים? So, על הדרך, the Ibn Ezra says other prophecies where Hashem tells Yeshua to walk around naked. You think he walked around naked? It was a prophecy. This is a prophecy. Paro saw these cows on the thing. He didn't see the cows. It's all dreams. They're dreams.
We hear about someone like Paro having these kinds of dreams where like actual things like this happen. But when was the time that like a prophet actually marries and has children in their dreams, in their prophecy?
Here.
This is the only time I can think of that.
The Rambam, in the famous Rambam, Machloket Rambam Ramban, says the whole story with Avram and the Malachim is all prophetic. It didn't happen.
Wait, what? Avram and Kilu...
The Malachim will come to tell him about the laid up, when he gives them food, right? And he goes and gives them food.
Oh,
beginning of Parshat Vayera.
Wait, why does it have to be a dream? It's not even that mystical.
No.
The Rambam says it's all Mar'eh and Nevuah. The Ramban does not agree with him, but the Rambam says that.
I've heard that, but I'm saying in that case he didn't actually have kids and name the kids and take a.
This is a very complex vision. It's a vision. It's a vision. This is what he has. He's going through a vision. You people have very complex dreams. Can't get mamash.
Does Ibn Ezra standing on something from Chazal, or are you just saying just can't be? I know Ibn Ezra goes off on his own.
One second. Let's finish him up. וככה קח לך ולבנה, גם שכב על צד השמאלי, גם ואתה קח לך חיטין, גם דבר הזקן, והעד על זה, כל זה שאמר יחזקאל בתחילת ספרו וראה במראות אלוהים. ואומר במראות אלוהים הביאן אל ארץ ישראל. He brings Yechezkel has to lie on one side for 100 days and then 300 days on the other side. And so what do you think? What are you talking about? This is not, and you don't have to. And the Ibn Ezra is not only saying, what are you talking about? He's saying, Yechezkel says in the beginning of his book, I saw scenes of God, marot Elohim. These things I'm about to tell you are all marot Elohim. It's a title to prophecy. ואומר במראות אלוהים הביאני לארץ ישראל, right? He takes him to Eretz Yisrael. Yeah, he really took him to Eretz Yisrael. No, he didn't take him to Eretz Yisrael. It's a vision. Now, we're talking about prophets here, people, everyone. It could happen, okay? In other words, prophecies are prophecies. מה אתם רוצים? כאילו, don't be so surprised. They could happen. They could be happen in prophecy. It's not happen. בסדר? ואל תטמע, in the third line from the end of the Ibn Ezra, ואל תטמע בעבור שלא הזכיר בתחילת הנבואה מראות. It didn't say here in the beginning that Hosea sees in a mar'eh. כי הנה כתב דבר השם אשר היה על זכריה, ושם כתוב אחריו, וראיתי הלילה ואשא עיניי ואראה. והנה כתב באברהם במחזה, וכן הייתה כל נבואתו. It says in other prophets that they saw in נבואות, so the minute when it says Hashem spoke to him, we realize, just like the other prophets, it's במראה, so too here it's במראה. והנה אמר לו בדרך הנבואה, למה אשת זנונים? כי זנות תזנה הארץ. It's all prophetic, metaphoric. So, Ezra, okay?
Okay.
Happy?
Yeah.
Good. The Malbim doesn't agree. Let's see the Malbim. The Malbim, right after this. The Malbim says, והנה המפרש נתקשה להם העניין. איך ציווה השם לנביא לקחת אשת זנונים? How in the world could Hashem say such a thing? ואם כן יאמר הרבי אבן עזרא שזה היה רק במראה הנבואה. והתרגום יונתן יפרש בדרך משל, ואין בזה הכרח. You don't have to say that. כי הושע לא היה כהן, וזונה אינה אסורה לישראל. Okay. She got around the yeah, okay. והלא מצאנו, one second, והלא מצאנו, שציווה השם לנביא גם דברים שלא יאותו כפי חוקי התורה. והיא הוראת שעה. כמו שציווה ליחזקאל לגלח בתער, פאת ראשו וזקנו. ואליהו הקריב בשעת איסור הבמות. Says the Malbim, we see sometimes a prophet has to do things that are asur. Like Yechezkel has to legaleach, shave off with a tar, with a razor, his head. I don't remember where that happens, but he has to shave off with his head. That's isur d'oraita. You're not allowed to do that. It's isur of the Torah. What? Shave off here and here, and Yechezkel has to do that. Hashem tells him, and he tells Eliyahu to bring a korban outside of Beit HaMikdash. What we talked about in Yoshua, right? It's a Yisur Gadol to do that. In other words, he's saying, sometimes Hashem tells his prophet to do something that's Asur.
Over the top.
But why?
I'm sorry.
What's the Avera?
Oh,
We don't like it.
No, but it makes.
What's the
I
Avera?
understand the Malbim much better than like when talking about Eliyahu, like the concept of Eit La Sod La Hashem Yefilu Toratecha, like that's something that's much more like there's more basis for that in Tanakh than there is about like someone having dreams like this in Nebuah, right?
Okay. Again, the Rambam pulls many things that you would think are happening. He says they're Mareh Nevuah. A lot of things that we think as basic stories, like that story with Avram, is like basic.
Did he say Yonah at the end was also? Why not?
Oh, so first of all, I want to welcome to a very big argument in Yahadut. Okay, big argument of how to read Bemet stories in the Torah and in the Nevi'im. Do they really happen or they're prophetic? Does it really matter? It's an interesting question. It does matter, right? We're getting passionate. Ezra got pretty passionate here, right? We get passionate about it because it's important to us. We want to know, did it happen? Did it not happen? We want to know if it's real, not real. But there are different opinions. Okay, so just they're really, as you saw right here, the Ibn Ezra and the Malbim referencing the Ibn Ezra, saying, listen, what do you saw? Makara. What do you so worked up? Nachon, it's not so pashut. He says he's not a Kohen, so it's not Isur Doraita. But even though Lo Yeh Kadesh V'Kedesha, right? It's not pashut. It may be over in a set to take a. I'm not going into the halachic problems of prostitution here. Obviously, it's not beseder, right? At the end, he says, yeah, obviously, it's not pashut. But sometimes Hashem tells his prophets to do things that are not pashut.
That was the point, I think.
And that may be part of the shock value of the point here of what he's telling him to do. So even if it's a dream, there's a shock value to this dream, right? Obviously, someone who sees a vision like this of himself doing something like that, even if it's in a vision, is pretty shocking, what Hashem shows him. And if it's real, it's even more shocking. But it's on a retzef. And you guys can make your call. Who's your Rav? The Malbim or the Ibn Ezra? A long time. 700 years. Yeah, 800. The Malbim, Yachasit recent, the 1800s.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and the 1800s, 1900s, Ladati. I think he bridges that gap. Yeah, the Malbim.
On Bereshit is very interesting.
Yachasit recent. I mean, not very recent, but it's Yachasit recent. And Ibn Ezra is way back. Ibn Ezra is Rashi's time.
Like the 1000.
Yeah, 1000 plus. Yeah, Rashi's time. Pachot yoter.
I'm in no position to say this, but it seems to me that Ibn Ezra is always a contrarian. No, he doesn't agree with anyone. He's always like, no, it's not like this. It's like, and he has his own thing to say.
Well, that's because he's not following the
How is the Malbim able to even disagree? Like this is an Acharon contradictory.
The Malbim quotes Chazal. Rashi says, Rabotenu amru k'mashmao. Everyone understands.
What is Ibn Ezra standing on it?
Oh, that's the question. You have the Ibn Ezra cholek on Chazal. That's the thing.
Well, I think
And big time.
So Rashi read the story as mashma'o. The Ibn Ezra can say, Barur Chazal was talking in Nevuah. I mean, it's not clear. Chazal didn't say straight out, we are saying this really happened.
Rashi said it. Really
Rashi says k'mashma'o, right? Rabbeinu kumashma'o, right? As it is.
Rabbeinu there.
Rashi understands Chazal as saying it's pshat happened. Ibn Ezra doesn't have to understand Chazal that way.
I mean, Ibn Ezra often sort of doesn't. I should put this. His understanding of Midrash seems to be more or less that it's another like layer of understanding the story and not the pshat. Like it kind of is almost never the pshat.
Well, the Midrash is never the pshat.
Well,
I'd have to agree with that too. That's exactly why it's Midrash and not pshat.
But Rashi seems to believe that Midrash can help us bridge gaps in understanding the pshat.
I'll say it in another way. How mechuyav are you to explaining things only by the way Chazal explained it? That I think is a little bit of a discussion. Now, we've seen, right? We saw the Radak and others over history of what we've been learning, saying this is what Chazal say. The Ramban says this in the Torah also. This is what Chazal say. It has another way of explaining it. You could explain it by the pshat usually, as opposed to the drash. And they say, Chazal, we're talking drash, we're talking pshat, and there are two ways of explaining the psukim. And what?
Under that line of logic, you could eliminate every.
It's not eliminating. It's saying that Chazal are talking on a different level.
Chazal in one route, and now there's 4 other routes.
Nachon, that's right. The drash is bemet one of the routes.
But then Rashi doesn't seem to hold that way.
Rashi goes back. Rashi's more interesting in when he puts it in pshat, when he puts it in drash. Rashi brings midrasho kacha kacha upshuto kacha many times. Rashi says that he differentiates between when he says midrasho, it's chazal, okay, and when he says but pshuto upshuto shel mikra ve'en lanu ela pshuto shel mikra, says Rashi. Everyone goes back and forth here. Every learner, and you have to realize how free thinkers were our chachamim. Okay, they understand that the sha'arei perushim lo nin'alu. Okay, the fact that Chazal said what Chazal said about whatever they said isn't the end game in understanding the Torah. It is super important to understand the depth of the Torah through Chazal, and there are other ways to understand the Psukim. What the Rashbam says so beautifully, and the Rashbam is in the beginning of Parashat Vayeshev, he has a very long thing, including the fact that he argued with his Saba. Who's his Saba? Rashi. He argued with. He says, I argued with my Saba, and my Saba Hodali. He agreed with me, and he admitted to thing. And if he would have rewritten his Perush, he would have written otherwise. It's wonderful things, right? It's a nice Saba to have, right? Rashi. He would walk with his Saba, and they would argue about different things. Wouldn't that be nice if your Saba was Rashi? You could argue with him. But
what's the criteria of Chazal for deciding if they owed that something was literal or metaphorical?
It's very hard to see in Chazal. It's very hard to see in Chazal. Very hard. It's very hard, right? And like in this case, Rashi understood it. They're explaining this, or we'll see as we continue the midrash. We only read the beginning of it. That it seems pretty literal because they talk about really who she was and what she was. The lady is his wife that he marries, and the kids, and they bring it pretty literally. And that's how Rashi, that's how the Malbim probably understood it, and maybe even the Ibn Ezra understood it that way. And then he's saying, I don't agree. What you guys said, he sometimes could be Harif, the Ibn Ezra.
So will it matter? We'll get the same lesson.
No, not really. This will not matter to what we understand from here, because you'll either just metaphoric or real. But whatever it is, Hashem's definitely teaching him a lesson. Okay? And that's more important for us, that the prophet himself is being taught a lesson. And that's really what in other words, everyone agrees, and when Chazal say that Hosea answered the wrong answer before, and therefore Hashem has to do it, that everyone agrees. Even if he had this as a dream, it's a pretty bad dream. It's a nightmarish dream, right? To have this. So whatever it is, Hosea himself is being criticized. That everyone agrees, but how in the world did Hashem make him do this? Either before, which is even worse, or in a dream, he is being brought to a very, very difficult place.
Now, without this prequel, so to speak, without understanding this conversation, we have no idea. No?
Well, we'll see. We may have some idea, but definitely the prequel here it tells us that Hosea himself has to learn something very important. Before all of Am Yisrael, we're going to learn it through Hosea. As opposed to prophecies where the prophet says something straight to Am Yisrael, there are stories of the prophet who they themselves become a prophecy in a sense. What he goes through, what he sees, to the two opinions, is important for Am Yisrael to understand. Hosea, sort of like Sefer Yonah. Why do we have to learn Sefer Yonah, right? The end of Sefer Yonah did nothing to Am Yisrael, doesn't talk to Am Yisrael, doesn't say anything to Am Yisrael. Yonah himself goes through something very, very powerful, right? But we have to know it. That's very much like what's going on with Hosea. Hosea himself is going to go through something that we, Am Yisrael, have to know what he goes through, because there's something important that we're going to learn from it. So Hosea himself, who wanted to Laviram B'uma Acheret, is going to be the vessel of teaching us how difficult that statement is. Haviram B'uma Acheret. Okay. So let's finish up our midrash. Now that we learned the chapter, we just saw the chapter. Now you'll understand the phases of the midrash. So we'll go back to the previous page. Okay? And also we got a glimpse of if it did happen or it didn't happen. Now let's see what it is. Just want you guys, it's important for me as learners, this is on tape, so I'm bichlal, I hope it's okay. But don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Probably your question has been asked in the past. Okay? Don't think, oh, can I say this? But Chazal didn't say this. But they did. Ask. First of all, when you learn Chazal well, you'll usually understand how well they understood it, and they probably understood your question too, and you could find some kind of relation to your question. You'll be able to find it. No, they were that smart and that deep that when they said something, it wasn't because they didn't think of something else. Oh, did they know if it happened or didn't happen? Right? If we jump up and scream, did this happen or did this not happen? Chazal knew this to be a question, right? They were just as crazy as Ezra when they saw it also. Okay, can this possibly be, right? And the Ibn Ezra who jumps, he's not the first one, and you're not the last one, and there were before him. Chazal also saw this. Okay, so we have to always remember that usually when they give their perush, it's after this. Okay, they understood the questions we've had, and now they're going. Our questions are incorporated often into what they say. Just trust them that there's probably some kind of relationship, and even if you don't, beseder. Just as they saw things, sometimes we see things, and ask your question and try to and do it again. B'yashrut, b'yat using correct kelim. You can't just say whatever you want to say. Whenever you want to say, you have to understand the words and the connections, and the more proofs you have to what you want to say makes it more real. It's beseder. Beseder. That's what Torah is. So, right, Chalila. Okay, let's go. Okay, now the story gets a little worse, so let's go on. Okay. Amar Akadosh Baruch Hu, Ma e'aseh lezaken zeh. What do I do to this old man? This old kvetchy man who says Havirem be'uma acheret. I gotta teach him a lesson. Omar lo, everyone who has the page, be with me. Lech vekach isha zona, v'odid lecha banim znunim. And he already brings the end here. Ve'achar kach omar lo shelcha me'al panecha. After he marries this lady, has children with her, I'm going to tell him, get rid of her. Let's see if he can do that. Im hu yachol lishloach, af ani ishlach et Yisrael. If he can say, after he marries this lady and has children with her, that he can just let her go, then I'll let go of Israel. What does Hashem obviously understand?
That he won't.
That he can't. You can't. Let's go on. Now the story goes in. Ready? Here we go. It's a little bit.
So he wants him to not divorce her, or what?
Right. He wants him to understand how difficult it is to divorce her, even with the fact that she is a prostitute and his children aren't necessarily his children.
And they have these terrible names that Hashem told him to give.
To let go of this family
Still
doesn't happen.
But I don't know. I could.
Well, let's go on. Here we go.
How many kids do you have?
None.
Okay. Shenemar. Now Shenemar. Here we go. So now the story starts. Shenemar. Vayomer Hashem el Hosea, lech kach lecha eshet znunim ve'yaldei znunim. וכתיב וילך ויקח את גומר בת דבליים. גומר אמר רב שהכל גומרים בה. A lady who everyone has relations with. בת דבליים, דיבה רעה, בת דיבה רעה. She is the daughter of someone who's bad also, who is in the family. ושמואל אמר שמתוקה בפי הכל כדבלה. It was, people enjoyed her very much, like דבלה, like a sweet, something sweet. Rabbi Yochanan Amar she'akol dashin ba kedvela. Everyone has relations with her all the time, like kedvela. She is nothing positive. Nothing. Yeah, she's the worst of the worst.
Or the best in her job.
Davar acher, Gomer Amar Rabbi Yehuda shebikshu ligmor mamonam sheYisrael biyamea. That the money of Israel was supposed to disappear in her time. Now here it's already metaphoric. Okay, here they're already taking a step out. This is a davar acher. That in their time, the situation in Israel was really, really bad. The financial situation is very bad. Rabbi Yochanan Amar bazezu v'gamru. Shneimar ki avda melech Aram ve'simim ka'afar ladash. So here they're already going out. See how Chazal themselves have different explanations of going. One explains it within the story. Her name shows how much she was what she is, Isha Zona, and the other ones, Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Yehuda, They say, no. This is a metaphoric. In her period of time, in this period, we're talking about Hosea, that Am Yisrael was in a horrible situation. Which already, we're saying, okay, maybe this is really metaphoric. So we're going to have to see that also, that possibility. But let's continue our story. Vatar v'teled ben, ויאמר השם אליו קרא שמו יזרעאל, כי עוד מעט ופקדתי את דמי יזרעאל על בית יהוא, וישבתי ממלכות בית ישראל, ותער עוד ותלד בת, ויאמר קרא שמה לא רוחמה. He's quoting the psukim here. And lo ami, he brings him also. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 lines from the bottom. Mamash, the second word on the line. לאחר שנולדו לו שני בנים ובת אחת, אמר לו הקדוש ברוך הוא להושע, לא היה לך ללמוד ממשה רבך, שכיוון שדיברתי עמו פירש מן האישה, אף אתה בדול עצמך ממנה. He uses a halachic term. Just like Moshe Rabbeinu, when I spoke to Moshe Rabbeinu, he had to stop having relations with his wife. You have to stop having relations from your wife. I'm speaking to you. Divorce her. אמר לו, ריבונו של עולם, יש לי בנים ממנה, ואין אני יכול להוציאה ולא לגרשה. I have kids. I can't just throw her out. I can't just divorce her. I have responsibility here. אמר לי הקדוש ברוך הוא, ומה אתה, שאשתך זונה, ובניך בני זנונים, ואין אתה יודע אם שלך הם, אם של האחרים הם. כך, and you don't know if your children are yours or somebody else's. You have trouble. ישראל, שהם בניי, בני בחוניי, בני אברהם, יצחק ויעקב, אחד מארבעה קניינים שקניתי בעולמי. One of the 4 acquisitions that I acquired in my world. And then, I'm not sure. I think Bachunai comes from Chanina, but I'm not sure from the word Chanina, the ones I care about, I have mercy upon. And then they bring their 4 things that Hashem bought in the world. ואתה אמרת אבירם באומה אחרת? You told me, get rid of them. כיוון שידע שחטא, הושע, כיוון שידע שחטא, he realizes that he sinned. עמד לבקש רחמים על עצמו. He comes to ask for mercy on himself. I sinned. אמר לו הקדוש ברוך הוא, עד שאתה מבקש רחמים על עצמך, מבקש רחמים על ישראל, שגזרתי עליהם 3 גזירות בעבורך. Go, you had mercy for me, you have mercy for yourself, you know you sinned. Go ask mercy for Am Yisrael, that I have 3 decrees, evil decrees I decreed on them because of you, because you said, Havirem b'uma acheret. עמד וביקש רחמים וביטל גזירה, והתחיל לברכם, שנאמר, in the next chapter, which we'll see, which flips everything around. Okay?
The 3 were?
We'll see. Well, yeah, the 3 klalot, the 3 gzerot are Yisrael, Lo Ruchama, and Lo Ami.
Okay.
That's what you said. And you said, no, they're not yours. They're not Lo Ami. They're not Lo Ruchama. Right? What did he say? You were supposed to say, Galgel Rachamecha, no, Lo Ruchama. You were supposed to say, it's Ami, Amamcha, Banecha, Lo Ami. Hashem said, because of you, look what happened. Go ask Rachamim for them. And then we'll see, he's going to flip. In other words, we're going to see these names will be turned the Tov in the continuation. Okay? Yeah.
In this midrash, like, if we know that this woman was adulterous to him, like, isn't it assured that he remains married to her anyway, that he has to, he's chayat to divorce her?
Yes, we just talked about that.
Right.
You're saying it's effect. You're even in
I'm not going halachic on you. I'm using the Malbim, Horacha. We don't know. Everything here is out ex halacha. This is a unique situation of a prophet Mul Hashem, Bemet doing something that there's nothing here is lemaisa. Okay, no one leave this class thinking anything here was mutar. Until Hashem tells you something, nothing. Okay, this is all asur. But he's told to do all these things. Okay? You're right. He doesn't know he's b'safek. He probably shouldn't have relations with her, even though you could talk if you're safek. He didn't know, right? He didn't know if they're here or not.
It's safek for her. We could talk about sotah.
Nachon. Sotah could be here. Nachon. I'm not going to the halachic side of this because I meant we can't get out of it. But Chazal bring. So now that's the end of the story. You know, the end of this midrash or the end of this part. That Hosea himself has to experience the connection one has with his wife and children, even in the worst of situations. That's really what he wants to bring him to, that place where it's the worst of situations, where you don't know if your wife is faithful, or you even know she's not faithful. You don't know if your kids are your kids. That's a bad situation. But Hosea, when asked to do it, Hosea's basic, there's some deep connection that he says, I can't just throw her out. Hashem says, and you have trouble throwing her out? What about me? You think I can just throw them out? I can just change them with another nation? I can't. So why is this so important? Again, this question. Wonderful. Why is this so important? And here we have to try, what's the place of a prophet? The prophet himself. In Jewish history, the prophet himself is not just a intermediary between Hashem and Am Yisrael. He himself is almost a representative sometimes of the relationship between Hashem and Am Yisrael. Not just, you understand what I'm saying? It's not just an intermediary. He is sometimes, he's the actor between Hashem and Am Yisrael. And his job is much, much greater than just bringing Dvar Hashem. And therefore he has to be, as we said about Moshe Rabbeinu, he has to be super alert sort of all the time to try to find the schuyot of Am Yisrael. That's what the prophet has to do. He has a job to do. To be always alert, because what he's going to say and what he's going to do can really affect Am Yisrael. We see this throughout history. It's the great tzaddikim. And learning schut of Am Yisrael. Rav Kook has this thing where he talks about how the teaching of Sanegori of Am Yisrael is a huge part of the Torah. It's a learning of Torah that needs to be learned. The Sanegori of Am Yisrael, learning schut of Am Yisrael, is like a major issue that needs to be done. You have to learn it. You have to understand it. You have to go into it. We see what happens when it's not done properly. Hosea has to be taught. Tov. One more thing before now we go deeper into what we're doing in Hosea. We can't, and this has to do with the Midrash of the Shemot. We did Hosea ben Be'eri. The name Hosea is an interesting name. Okay? Hosea himself. The name Hosea, who do we know whose name is Hosea? Yoshua. Vayikra Moshe l'Hosea ben Nun, Yoshua. And who's another name we know who's Hosea? The last king of Israel's name is Hosea ben Elah, of Israel, Malchut Yisrael. It's a fascinating thing. We have the first person. No, he wasn't. He was the first king of Malchut Yisrael. Yerovam ben Navat. Yerovam ben Yoash, who's mentioned here, is not the last king of Israel. Yehuda. Don't get confused. There's Israel and Yehuda. Tzidkiyahu is the last king of Yehuda. And Hosea ben Elah is the last king of Israel, right? I'm right? You have it on the list? Wonderful. Okay, so the word Hosea really takes Am Yisrael from the beginning till the end. Nachon, Yehoshua brings Am Yisrael in. Hosea brings them out. Brings Mechet Yisrael out. In the middle we have the prophet Hosea, who is the one who starts telling them the beginning of the end. Really, he's the prophet who talks about the beginning of the end. Okay, this prophecy of the ending of Malchut Yisrael is the first time we're getting this prophecy. Okay, up until that point, Malchut Yisrael was there. It was existing. No one knows it's about to disappear. There were ups and downs, hard times, good times, bad times. Hosea brings this as a prophecy the first time we understand that Malchut Yisrael is on its way out. Just let's keep this in mind, okay, as we continue learning, because we're going to see lines of how Hosea, on the one hand, is trying to hold on, and on the other hand, realizes the end is coming. How do you hold these things together? How do you keep the land, like Yoshua ben Nun, while knowing that the end of the day of Hosea ben Elah is going to end? We're going to have to see how we do this, and maybe also how you deal with exile, how you deal with ending. What do you do Is it over? Is it not over? The great discussion of machloket in the Gemara between are Am Yisrael always called banim or not always called banim? Okay, is resonates here. There's a machloket. The Tanaim is Am Yisrael. Are they always banim or they're only banim when they do Ratzon Hashem? Are they always banim or not? Are they always the children of Hashem, or they're only the children of Hashem when they're doing Ratzon Hashem?
We just saw here they're always.
So right. So here Hosea is leaning towards that. But Bezrat Hashem, we'll see that sugi on the Gemara also. Yalla, let's learn with Hosea now. Okay, that was all. These are like around, and even though we saw the parak now, Baruch Hashem, so we saw it. But now let's learn who are these three kids? Who are they referencing? Why three? Who each one of them are they at a time? So most of the basic parshanim explain the names Yisrael, Lo Ruchama, and Lo Ami as actual periods that are starting now in Malchut Yisrael and are leading till the exile of Malchut Yisrael. That's how most of the Perushim understand what's going on here.
They get worse.
As it progresses, this is the beginning of the end, right? Yisrael, they're still somewhat okay. Lo Ruchama is worse, and she's a bat. She's weak. Okay, when the Am Yisrael gets weak, and at the end it's going to be Lo Ami when Hashem says, that's it, you're gone. Okay, so let's just see some of that in the Perushanim here. So let's jump over the first Rashi. There, see the Ibn Ezra. Okay, see the Ibn Ezra here. So he says, "Vatar vateled bat, ze hador haba acharav." After Hosea, v'kerao bat. כי כתוב אחרי רובם הוא השיב את גבול ישראל, ואחרי מות זכריה בנו מלך מנחם, ובימיו בא מלך אשור. So he says, Israel is referencing Yerovam, who Hosea starts prophesying in his day. Yerovam was a very powerful king. Israel, and his kingdom was in Israel, he was a powerful, but then later came kings who were very weak, like Menachem. And in his time, the king of Ashur started conquering the land. So that's why it's a bat. Kilo malach, and then so he doesn't mention some of them. We may Pekach ben Ramaliyahu.
One question.
Yeah.
Who was Yehu? Yehu.
Yehu.
He'll destroy Yehu.
We'll get to that. Okay, we'll get to that when we go in. Okay, we're going to dive in because we have to learn some Tanakh for that. Okay, to understand. Yehu is important here.
He's the king, no?
Yeah, he's the king. The king of Israel. Yeah. So, כי לא מלך אלא יחם, ובימי פקח בן רמליהו, תגלת פילסר רבים מערי ישראל, ובימי הושע בן אלה, that's the last king we just mentioned, נלכדה שומרון, על כן קרא זה הדור בת. So the Ibn Ezra says, the whole generation following the king that Hosea is talking in his time, Yerovam, they're all considered females. Females because everything's just, everything's getting lost there. They're very, I'm sorry, can you say this in the 21st century? He's relating to the weakness of Malchut Yisrael as a bat, as that's Lo Ruchama. Now he says there's a ben and a bat and a ben, right? There are three children being born. He says Yisrael is referencing the king at his time, Yerovam, who was still a powerful king, not the Yerovam, the first Yerovam, the second Yerovam. Yerovam in his time, again, we're going to have to get a whole picture here of what's going on. But one of the kings is named Yerovam ben Yoash. He's from the lineage of Yehu, who we mentioned before. And he in his time, Hashem expanded the kingdom very much. We learned about in Yonah, if you guys remember. That was Yonah's prophecy to him. That he expanded the kingdom very much. He was very powerful. And that was the last time Malchut Yisrael was really powerful. From then on, it's a female aspect that they're very weak. That's what Ibn Ezra. Okay, so the Ibn Ezra continues. Vatigmol, holidu banim ashvatim shegalu begalutam, v'sham amdu v'lo shavu la'artzam, al ken karam lo ami. So he says the next child who's born, lo ami, are the children born in exile. The banim born in exile, and those children, they never came back. The 10 tribes, the missing 10 tribes. They never returned, and they're lo ami. So it goes, really, it's son, daughter, no one. The next son is Bexem is like annihilated. That's what happens. He disappears. Okay? That's how the Ibn Ezra reads the meaning of this nevuah. There's a prophecy Hosea is saying that Am Yisrael are going, Malchut Yisrael, the kingdom of Israel, is going to weaken and weaken and weaken until they disappear. That's the prophecy. Okay? That's it's historical. It works with knowing the stories of the kings that come later. And here the Radak is going to spell it out even better on the next page. Vatar vateled lo ben. Amar ben ki Yerovan ben Yoash היה חזק במלכותו, כמו הזכר, שהוא חזק מהנקבה. You guys good with the Hebrew here? He says Ben Yerovan ben Yoash was strong in his kingdom, like a male, who's stronger than a female. ומלך 41 שנה, he ruled for 41 years, והשיבו ישראל, he expanded the boundaries. So I'm not reading Yonatan at the moment. Pasuk Hey, בעמק יזרעאל, קשתם שהיה בעמק יזרעאל כי ראש ממלכת אפרים שומרון, ויזרעאל כי בית מלכות אחאב היה בשומרון ויזרעאל. וכן המלכים הבאים אחרי. He says Israel is a code name for the kingdom of Israel. Yisrael, that he said Yisrael is the code name for the kingdom of Israel, because that's where they had their palace. Okay? Now let's go on. ותר עוד ותלד בת, אחרי שילדה בן, והוא משל לירבעם, like I said, ילדה בת. והוא משל לזכריה בנו, ולשלום בן יבש, שמלך אחריו, just like the Ibn Ezra said, that they were very weak kings, שהיו חלשים כנקבה. כי זכריה לא מלך אלא 6 חודשים, they ruled for very short time, 6 months, 1 month, they were gone. Okay? I'm jumping over the next one. Okay, so we see ותגמול את לא רוחמה ותרד ותלד בן. Amar vatigmol. Now he explains why only on the daughter it says that she weaned him, right? In between the first son and the second and the daughter, it didn't say they weaned the son. Only the daughter's weaned. She finishes nursing. Why does it say vatigmol? לפי שארכו ימי החולשה בימי זכריה ושלום, וגם בימי מנחם בן גדי, גם בימי פקחיה ובנו. All these kings were very weak. And there was a long period of weak kings. That's why we're saying it took a long time. The tigmoloto, there's time to have to actually wean him off. So it was a longer period of time that Am Yisrael was like a bat, was like a female. Then again, they strengthened again. עד שעמד פקח בן רמליהו והתחזק במולכה ומלך 20 שנה והתגבר על מלכות יהודה. This king of Israel was a powerful king named Pekach ben Remaliah. He did all kinds of trouble. He fought against Yehuda. ועליו אמר בזה המשל ותר ותלד בן. So what's the difference between the Ibn Ezra and the Radak? It's understanding who the last Ben is. According to the Radak, the last Ben is the children. Right, according to the Radak, it's a king of Israel. It's further down of a king of Israel. According to the Ibn Ezra, we're already in exile. The king we're talking about this son already in exile. So but really, both of them are historically correlating this prophecy to specific periods that are going to happen in the future after Hosea's time. When exactly is the Ben? When exactly is the Bat? How many years? That's said there. We'll have to see exactly how that works out. Okay, but they're referencing. Be'etzem Hosea is giving the prophetic view of what is going to happen to Malchut Yisrael from now on. Both of them see it that way. These children, each one references a different period of time that's coming now. This is what's going to happen.
So according to Radak, Israel going into exile strengthened them in a way?
No, he's not talking about exile. The Radak's not talking about exile. He's going to finish up here, 1 second. ועל דורו נאמר קרא שמו לא עמי, כי עליו נאמר ויעש הרע בעיני השם לא שר מכל חטאת ירבעם בן נבט. So he says, this guy's generation was lo ami because they left the derech legamre. Pekach ben Remaliah. In other words, the prophecy of Hosea doesn't reach the exile, according to the Radak. This prophecy, opening prophecy in Parak Aleph, doesn't reach the exile. It's only up to almost the exile, almost the end of Malchut Yisrael. But it doesn't include Malchut Yisrael, the exile itself. He says, "V'chacham Rabbi Avraham peresh mashal v'tigmol achar shegalu 10 השבטים." והולידו בנים השבטים בגלותם, ושם עמדו ולא שבו אותם, על כן קרא שמו לעמי, וכן תרגם יונתן. So he says, I understand that the Ibn Ezra doesn't agree with me, and the Tirgum Yonatan doesn't agree with me, but I don't agree with them. Right? That's what the Radak says. I understood what they say, I don't agree. I think the prophecy is referencing to a different king. Now, of course, everything we're saying now...
Is he saying that's more metaphorical?
No. It's not it's not a machloket of metaphor or not metaphor. It's a machloket of what it's referencing. They both agree that it's referencing history. The question is, how much of history are we referencing, or how far this goes, this prophecy? It's definitely going into the future. How far into the future it is, that's the question. If it's the last child is referencing a king of Israel, or the last child is referencing the exiles, the people who are in exile. Okay? That's their machloket. But both of them agree that what we're talking about is a historic prophecy. It's not a spiritual prophecy per se. It's a historic prophecy. And that's one way of explaining this drasha, this nevuah, this prophecy, okay? Again, besides the story if it happened or it didn't happen, everyone agrees that whatever's happening has meaning. In other words, to have 3 children, dafka, call them these names, it's obviously referencing something. We can't just say, he said, have it and have kids, and then it will be hard for you to go. That's too general. There's specifics. Hashem tells them what to call each child. I mean, it's obviously important. The specifics are important here. But what do the specifics mean? This is what we saw. Okay, so these are the Radak and the Ibn Ezra. Both bring it right into the historical context. Okay? Tov. The Malbim also does historical. If you guys look at the very end, just to see how the Malbim goes further down, the Malbim, if you guys look at the very end of your page, in Pasuk Chet, the very end of the Malbim, at the end of the pages here. Next page over, towards the end. Pasuk Chet, you guys see? ותגמול את לא רוחמה. הילד השלישי לא ילדה תכף בימי מניקיתה, כמו שילדה את השני. He agreed with the Radak that the third, in between the second and third child, there's a longer period of time. רק אחר שגמלה את לא רוחמה, אז נתעברה מן הילד השלישי, כי הילד השלישי שנקרא לו עמי, מציין חורבן יהודה וגלותם. The third child, he's talking to Yehuda. Whoa, another 150 years in the future. He's not only referencing Israel, that's what the Ibn Ezra said, right? The exile of Israel. He's saying this is the exile of Yehuda. That took a really long time. He calls them a ben, so all 3 of these Perushim that we're seeing here, all of them are really giving us views into historical context. Both the Malbim and the Ibn Ezra and the Radak, they're all giving us historic perspective. There's much more in the Malbim to see, but I want to stop here for a minute just to see the vision that they're all agreeing on the basic understanding. But there is another way to explain Hosea, and that's important for our purposes, I think, to understand what it is. And for that, we're going to have to go into the Tanakh and understand what Israel is, okay? Why Israel is brought here in this place, and what the Ruchama means. Okay, so for that we're going to have to open our Tanachim. So if you guys open the book of Melachim, please, and understand the shever that Am Yisrael goes through in the time of Yehu. Okay, so we're going to have to understand, really we'd have to learn a whole book now to understand exactly what's going on here. As we don't have this, you're going to have to trust me about different parts of the story that we're not reading inside. So it's Melachim Bet. I'll have to give another intro to this, but we're going to Melachim Bet.
Where in Melachim Bet? What
Perek... No. Perek Tet. It's really Perek Tet. Okay, we're going to meet Yehu for the first time. But before we meet Yehu, let me give a quick rundown of where we're standing right now. Okay, The king is from the house of Achav. Okay, not Achav himself, but from the house of Achav. Achav was the first king who makes, again, we talked about this when we learned about Yoshua, and we connected Yoshua, remember the Yericho, that Achav, in Achav's time, they rebuilt Yericho, so we talked about what Achav was so horrible about. Achav made the official religion of the kingdom idolatry. The first time that really happens. Now, even in Shlomo's time, there's idolatry, but they're serving Hashem in Beit HaMikdash. There's idolatry all over the place, but it's a sin that's being done parallel to Avodat Hashem. Okay? No one in the right mind until Achav and his wife, Goyish wife, Izebel, actually flip the Avodah. That's what happens in Achav's time. Achav is considered the worst king up to his time. No one does as bad as Achav because he changes the religion officially, which means if you're an Oved Hashem now, you are a minority, a nirdaf, they're a persecuted minority. That's what happens. That's what why the prophets have to hide, right? The whole story, if you guys remember, the prophets hide in a cave, and Obadiah says, I saved them.
What's the source that Izebel's a Goya?
She's Malkat Gshur. She's the daughter of the king of, I don't remember, Gshur, I think, or Talmai. She's the daughter of one of the kings. It says it Beferush. Yeah, it says it Beferush. She's a Goya. So this is the kingdom of Achav. The kingdom of Achav is really, really bad. It's worse than anything ever. Yerovam ben Navat, who starts the kingdom of Israel and sins for all time because he makes those idols. They're for Hashem, though. The Agalim that Yerovam made, if you guys remember, when Yerovam separates the kingdoms, he has to make sure that Am Yisrael doesn't go to Beit HaMikdash. So he makes two areas of idol worship, of Avodat Hashem, in Dan and in Beit El, and he says you could serve Hashem there now, but he's serving Hashem. Yerovam would never in his wildest dreams think that we're serving Avodah Zarah. He was religious. We talked about the fear of the Shtayim V'Chetzi Shvatim. Everything connects, right? In Yoshua, that was their fear, right? Their fear, once you start serving somewhere else, then it's a slippery slope. And it's a slippery slope. That's what happens in Yisrael, Malchut Yisrael. They start serving idolatry. But Achav is like, he's the one who does this. So Hashem has a serious cheshbon with Beit Achav.
Is that why people say he might be the worst king ever?
Yeah.
Because all the kings before didn't really much serve Avodah Zarah, but Achav did.
Yeah, well, again, because he officially made it. That's why. That's why later Menashe is going to do the same thing in Yehuda. He's going to be the worst of Yehuda. The king Menashe, the son of Chizkiyahu, that's what he does also. Really, he officially changes the thing. Everyone else, it's sort of on the side. But it gets really bad when it becomes government policy. Just an aside for our days, okay? An aside for our days. The battle for Israel's soul on a general nationalistic level is a real thing. It's a real thing. In other words, Tachbura Tziburit on Shabbat or not Tachbura Tziburit, it's a real question. Because when someone drives on Shabbat, that's one level of sin. But when the government decides to do something, that's this level of sin. We're talking Achav and Menashe. We're talking big trouble, okay? Again, it's not good when individuals do the sin, obviously. But there's a difference when it's government sanctioned. If the government is the representative of Am Yisrael, to say we will be doing something asur straight out is much, much more problematic. That's why there's a battle for the public area of Am Yisrael. A real battle, a battle, a legal battle, a representative battle, a battle that's happening for what's going on here in Medinat Yisrael. What is going on?
Is that why the chametz in the
Yafeh, nachon, bidiyuk. You can't stop anyone from bringing in. If the guy bought in a pita, eat a pita, you can't shoot him, right? But if you say yes, you can do it, it's a completely different statement. This is what we're talking about. This is why it's serious. This is why these kings are the worst of the kings. Because it was done. Everyone knew everyone was doing it. But whether you sanction it or not, right? If when you turn it from I fell to it's okay, that's when a sin is a catastrophe. Na'asa lo ke'ergel. The idea of a sin becoming, when I taught high school kids, I would always say, listen, we do our mistakes. We're all human. Be it in the sexual realm or other realms. We're human. But if you could sit with another person and share your sin with them and not be embarrassed of your sin, that's dangerous. That's danger. You yourself, we're weak. We sin. We do things wrong. Halvai that we wouldn't, but we're human. The minute you're not ashamed of the sin, the minute your sin is acceptable, you're in a whole new ball game. It's a whole new ball game. Much, much worse. Much more dangerous where you are. Because then you're going to legitimize that and legitimize others. You're going to find a reason that it's okay. That's what you do. Once you're not ashamed.
For instance, prostitution in Israel now is for some reason okay, legal.
It's not legal.
No?
It's not legal. Some people want to make it legal to protect the women. That's the statement. As we want to try to it's sort of like it's the Tana about grass, right? About things. If we institutionalize it, then people won't use all horrible things.
Ezra might be correct.
To make like a red light district, because
No, I'm saying it might actually be
legal.
It's actually legal. You cannot be arrested.
There is strip clubs in Tel Aviv.
No, it's not that it's legal. What it is it's like, well, I guess it is technically legal, but to have a place to like rent out whores is completely illegal.
We have other dugmaot.
We
have other dugmaot that could get in the
in
same.
the Middle East. I mean, Middle East. I know it's mostly Muslim. I'm saying in the Middle East, Tel Aviv has been like the center of prostitution for
Chametz in the hospital gives
years.
us the same likud without
But Beseda, these are powerful things. These are things that you have to understand that the statement, let me do whatever I want, which is the Western statement, and say, you can't tell me how to live my life, doesn't work for Am Yisrael. It just doesn't work. On the individual level, it doesn't work. It doesn't work on the Klali level, vadai. In other words, for the government to sanction everyone to do whatever they want, you just can't do that here in Israel. You can do it in other places.
It's also self-defeating. The government's not going to last if they let people do whatever they want. So they're digging their own grave.
That's on a political level. I'm saying on a spiritual level, it doesn't work here. We'll all pay for this. In other words, the minute you allow it in the public sphere, it's very bad. Let's get back to Achav. This is Achav, okay? This is Achav. Hashem has a long cheshbon with Achav, okay? And here in Perek Tet, Hashem sends a prophet to Yehu. Who's Yehu? Let's read the prayer. Ve'elisha Navi kara le'echad mibnei hanevim. Chazal say this is Yonah Navi. Vayomer lo chagor motnecha. Put your belt on. Kach pach shemen. Take the anointing oil. Ve'lech Ramot Gilad. Go to Ramot Gilad. V'ata sham resham Yehu ben Yoshafat ben Nimshi. Find this guy named Yehu. He's a general. Uvata v'kemoto mitochecha ve'veto ito cheder becheder. You take him, bring him into a room. Lakachta pach hashemen, take this the oil, ve'yatzakta al rasho, you'll anoint him, ve'amarta ko amar Adonai meshachticha lemelech al Yisrael. Upatachta aderet ve'nasta ve'lo tichake. You anoint him and run away. Ve'elech anar anavi Ramot Gilad, ve'yavo ve'inei sarei achai yoshvim, ve'yomer davar li elecha asar, ve'yomer Yehu el mi mikulanu. Yehu's sitting there. We read this.
All the kings,
not all the
generals.
Yes, very good.
And he says, I want to speak with you, sir. And he's like, and he says, which sir do you want?
That's exactly what I just read. That's exactly right. We learned this in Yonah. Yeah. So he comes and Yehu sees this guy. They thought they were crazy. They're military men. They see this crazy religious guy, and he says, I'm talking to you. He comes, he takes him inside. Look at Pasuk Vav. Ko amar Adonai Elohei Yisrael meshachticha lemelech el am Adonai el Yisrael. Hashem anoints you as king. Just so you should know, Achav was not anointed. Yerovam was not anointed. He is told he's going to rule by Achia, a Shiloni. But He's anointed. Ashachticha lemelech al am Adonai Yisrael. Whew. This is serious things. And what's his job? V'ikita et bet achav adonecha. V'nikamti dmei avadai haneviim udmei kol avdei Adonai miyad Izevel. I will have revenge on Beit Achav and on who? On all my prophets and all those who served Hashem from the hand of Izavel, right? His wife, Achav's wife.
Yehu was Achav's general at this time?
He was a general in the army. Ve'avad kol bet Achav, v'ichrati l'Achav meshtin bakir v'atzu v'azu b'Yisrael. There's not going to remain anyone alive from Bet Achav. V'natati et Bet Achav kibet Yerovam ben Nevat ukbet Baasha ben Achia. Just as the previous lineages of kings of Israel were destroyed, so too I'm going to destroy Bet Achav. Vet Izevel, one second. Okay, listen to this. Vet Izevel yochlu aklavim efo? Bechelek Yisrael. Ve'en kover. Ve'iftach hadelet vayanos. So he runs away. He tells him this prophecy. You're going to kill all of Beit Achav. You are the anointed of God. You're going to be the king, and your job is to kill them all. And I will have revenge on them. You're going to kill Izevel in Israel, and he runs away. So then the story continues.
Yehu is king of Yehuda?
Yehu is a general in the army of Israel.
Oh, but he was anointed king.
King of Israel. He anoints him, but no one else knows this. He does this in secret. The prophet comes, puts him. So Yehu comes out, the continuation of the story, Yehu comes out, and the guys say to him, what was it? What did he say? What did he say? The other generals are like, what did he say? He said, he was a nutcase. He was telling me all kinds of things. Mamash is shot, okay? He's telling me all these things. And they say, no, tell us what he said. He said, he said, I'm going to be king. And he said, and the generals go, that's it, you're king. Mamash, like, boom. And they anoint him king. And he's king. So now, what's his job? To go kill Achav. Achav's dead. This is Achav's children already. Okay, Achav's passed away. This is the children of Achav. I would just remind everyone that Achav, at this point, time's up, huh? Are we going to stop in the middle of the story?
It says the very end is very interesting. Like they talk about
Izevel dying in Israel.
Yeah,
Well, Israel is going to be mentioned here a lot of times in this chapter. All right, I'm going to tell it by heart. Okay, what happens here? Achav, the king of Israel, and the king of Yehuda at this point are relatives because the king of Yehuda married Achav's daughter, so they've already intermingled, and they're bad. Both places are bad. The king of Israel, again, the son or grandson of Achav, he was injured in war, and comes to be healed in Yisrael. That's where he comes to be healed in Emek Yisrael. His cousin, brother-in-law, I don't remember the exact relationship, comes to visit him. The king of Judah comes to visit him. At that point, when they're both together, Yehu comes riding up with his band of soldiers. He rides crazy. Okay, he's like a crazy guy. That's what it says. He says the horse is running like a crazy horse. And I see, and the guy who's watching says, "Oh, I see someone's coming," and he's riding like Yehu. Yehu had a way of riding which was nuts. And he comes riding, and he kills the king of Israel and the king of Yehuda. He kills both of them. Okay? Why? Because they're Beit Achav. Both of them are from Beit Achav. And he kills both of them in Yisrael. Okay? In Emek Yisrael, in the area of Yisrael. And then he goes to Izevel. And he kills Izevel in Yisrael. She's also there in the kingdom. And all this, as the Tanakh says beferush, that this is revenge for the blood of Navot HaYisraeli. Who's Navot HaYisraeli? Famous story with Achav. Achav is a vineyard that he wants to take over. Whose land was that? Navot HaYisraeli. What does that mean? He's Israeli. He's from Israel. And he kills them in Israel, revenge for the fact that Achav stole it. Israel is very present in Yehu's capturing of the land. And when we read this, Israel is, I'll read it positively, is a chance. Yehu is nimshach by Hashem, the only king of Israel who, besides Yerovam, who's divinely said to be king, as a punishment to Shlomo. Yehu is the only king who really gets Hashem's stamp on him to be king of Israel. And there's a chance here in Yisrael that Hashem is planting a seed that possibly, maybe, there's a sikui to salvage Yisrael. There is a chance. Yisrael, Hashem's planting a seed here that maybe we're going to destroy Beit Achav and plant a new sapling will come out. This is the chance that we have at Yehu. Unfortunately, this is not what's going to happen. We're going to stop here, okay? And we're going to see what does happen with Sofo Shel Davar. But Yehu does his job very well. He kills all of Beit Achav. Kills them all. Everyone, everywhere, very bloodily. Also, he cuts their heads off. He's like not the person you would want to mess with.
He pushed Izebel off of.
He didn't push him off. He tells the servants to push him off.
Yeah, to push her off, and then she.
Bezrat Hashem, next week, Sunday, we will continue.